Welcome into the JP and Hack Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network. This is Season 1, Episode 8. We are presented by our partners over at Bet River Sportsbook. Of course, I'm your host, Joshua Perry. I'm out here chilling with my co-host, my guy, Christian Hackenberg. How we doing?
I'm good. I think I'm a little bit better than you, though. I'm back home, cozy, where I want to be.
Yeah.
You're up in what, Madison right now?
Madison, Wisconsin. There's a slight bit of chill in the air too compared to Columbus. It's unseasonably warm at home right now, so this is why I got feel like the same sweatshirt I wear every damn week, but that's why I got the sweatshirt on. Yeah, I mean, this past weekend we got some really good football games. Obviously, the marquee game was the Iowa-Penn State. I think it lived up to the hype just in terms of some of the drama in the final score. If you're a Penn State fan, you probably got a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth because of the Clifford injury. That was a really good one. And then, the other one that we kind of predicted that was a little bit off the board was that Michigan-Nebraska. That ended up being a really, really good second half.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great game. I'm going to give you more credit than me. I mean, I kind of had it circled, but I hadn't been paying as much attention to Nebraska as I think you have. And you were right. I mean, that offense is starting to click a little bit. Defensively, they're doing enough to challenge teams. So, and I only think that's going to keep getting better and better. And, you know, we'll touch on that more later on. I don't want to burn it yet, but that was exciting and good to see.
For sure. So let's recap some of the scores here, and then we'll get into our deep dive into some of last week's games. So scores for you, we had Michigan State 31, Rutgers 13. We had Ohio State absolutely pummeling Maryland 66-17. Wisconsin getting back on track against Illinois. They blanked them. It was 24-0. Obviously that Iowa and Penn State 23-20. And that's a game that we're going to do a real deep dive into. And then the nightcap, it was Michigan beating Nebraska 32-29. As we look at the AP poll here for the first time in the history of the conference, we have 5 Big Ten teams in the top 10 of the AP poll, starting off with Iowa at number 2, Ohio State at 6, Penn State 7, Michigan 8, Michigan State 10. You said this, I've said this. As you look at this, the Big Ten East is going to be an absolute meat grinder. And you sent me the schedule for kind of some of the remaining big matchups there. You want to go over that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I think October 30th, you have Penn State at Ohio State. The same day, you have Michigan at Michigan State. November 13th, you have Michigan at Penn State, which always is a game.
Yeah.
November 20th, you have Michigan at Ohio State. We all know how that one's been traditionally, but I think that's going to be a little bit different this year. And then on November 27th, to round it out, you have Michigan State at Ohio State. Sorry, it was November 20th. 27th is Michigan at Ohio State, or Ohio State at Michigan, and then November 27th is Penn State at Michigan State. So a lot of Michigans in there, but That's interesting. I mean, that's the back half of the year loaded like that. I don't think the Big Ten's seen that in years.
No, I mean, it hasn't been like that in a little while. And I think it's really that October 30th weekend that I think is going to shed a ton of light on what's going on in the conference. You got Ohio State and Penn State, obviously, in that one, which I think is a game that people had circled at the beginning of the year anyway. And depending on if Sean Clifford can get back and healthy, that's going to be a hell of a game. And then you've got a rivalry, a traditional rivalry with Michigan going to Michigan State. And Mel Tucker is just one of those guys who's like super on top of stuff, gets on his team. And the way that Harbaugh's coaching right now, I know he's going to have his guys motivated and fired up for that one. So I think just even in a couple of weeks is going to be really exciting. And then you talked about what goes on in November. It's going to be crazy, man.
Yeah, I think that's what us as Big Ten fans have been waiting for this. And
yes.
I just think it's really, again, it's just, we talk about this week in, week out, but it's so good for the conference. I think it's so good for college football to have somebody outside of the SEC with a super competitive in-conference in division schedule. So it's I think it's going to really separate the boys from the men.
Yeah.
And put someone in the position, if they survive that, to really make a run in the college football playoff this year.
Yeah, and to me, it's not even like somebody just outside of the SEC. It's the fact that Bama's got a loss to an unranked team, you know, and it's the fact that it's not just Ohio State in the conversation, or even Penn State, who's had success recently. We're talking about Iowa as a leader of the pack at this point. And then you've got Michigan looking like what it traditionally should look like, in Michigan State taking a huge step. Nobody thought they were going to be in this position. Like, that's the really cool part about it.
Yeah, I mean, that we talked about it in the preseason preview. I mean, Michigan State was at the bottom of your list. I still
they were in the basement.
A little bit of love, but but to your point, it was just a massive leap, and I don't think anyone's seen it. And they're getting so much production from so many different guys right now. Yeah. At least offensively, they got the weapons, and then you always can't discount or discredit the fact that they're going to have guys on the defensive side of the ball that are going to fly around and play a tough physical brand of football.
Yeah. And I'll go over a couple of those guys that you were talking about for them, since we're not really recapping their game because it wasn't necessarily a big one. But like Kenneth Walker, right, goes for 233 and a touchdown. He had the longest play from scrimmage in school history. And the way that he made guys miss on that play. But there was another one that a lot of people didn't see, but he made an all Big Ten linebacker miss in the hole, shook him in the hole. People can't do that. Running backs do not do that. It is ridiculous.
He's got it's weird when you watch him run. He has a Le'Veon Bell feel to him. Yeah. But it almost feels like he has an extra gear that Le'Veon didn't have. Yeah, and he can just run away from people. And he's, and to your point, making a guy miss in the hole, like, you have to have some fast twitch, stop go ability. And he's got it, but he's also got that patience that you see when you watch Le'Veon run, and he kind of runs similar to him. And it's cool seeing him. I mean, he's been a really fun back to watch this year.
I agree. He absolutely has. Right. And then you go over to their wide receivers, and the guy who it's been for a lot of the games so far is Jaden Reed, who's transferred in. He's a really good player. But Jalen Naylor said, nah, he's not the only one that can catch the football on this offense. He had 3 passes of 60 yards or more, went for 221 and 3 touchdowns. And most of his production, if not all of it, was in the first half of that game against Rutgers. So now you've got Jalen Naylor and Jaden Reed as legit threats in the pass game. And you've got Kenneth Walker, who is a legit Heisman contender, right, in the run game. And I'm sitting here as a guy who played on defense. What the hell am I supposed to do, coach? Like, how are we going to stop these guys?
I mean, we talked about it though, man. Like, if you can establish a physical brand of football at the line of scrimmage and with a running game, it opens up so many doors for you down the field. And now that you have 2 guys who can separate, I mean, they can flat out separate against anything. And when you give them a run game that they can then create, lazy eyes in the backfield and guys get 3 or 4 steps out of place, I mean, that's only going to create more and more separation. And that's a very, very scary thing, like you're saying, as a defensive guy. And offensively, I love watching it because it's just got they have such a flow. It's like watching a really, really good boxer. It's just, we're going to pound it here, and then we're going to take it over up top on you. And they did that in a really creative way, and eventually just ran away from Rutgers, especially in that second half. So it was they're going to be fun to watch, especially this year. But then moving forward, I really think Mel's got that thing going in the right direction.
So I said this, and some people kind of looked at me with a little bit of side. But I think that this is the team that people need to have their worries about, right? I think Ohio State is going to open people's eyes because of what they can do offensively, right? But I think that their defense is still gettable. They're coming along. They're not quite there yet. But I think this Michigan State team, the way that Peyton Thorne has been playing and the weapons that they have on offense, it really does kind of remind me of what Ohio State is doing in a way, because they can move the ball and they can put up yards and eventually they can score points. And so if I'm Ohio State, if I'm Michigan, if I'm Penn State, this is a team that probably gives me some heartburn. Like, you got to worry about everybody else. But depending on what this offense is really clicking like, it almost gives you that they can be nearly as explosive as Ohio State if you let them type by.
To me, they're even more scary than any of those guys because they entered this season with zero expectations.
Yeah.
And I think Mel preaches that week in, week out, right? Yeah. So they have absolutely nothing to lose. I mean, if they went out and lost the rest of the games this year, I don't think everyone was like, that was kind of a letdown. But at the same time, they had no expectations to even be competitive this year. So
Mel talked
that's
about
what makes
in the
scary.
press conference how he was putting up the stat sheet from last year's games as kind of a revenge factor.
Yeah.
Bro, like nobody even, like a coach would never admit to the media that they're thinking about revenge. And Mel's that guy. So like if he doesn't have the revenge aspect, you're 100% right. He's going to use the, well, nobody thinks we're worth a damn aspect, even though people are talking about them like they're worth a damn. He is Nick Saban and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady when it comes to the motivation.
Yeah. He digs deep, and he attacks those things that I wouldn't say every player is wired that way, but every player responds. No matter who you are, they're responsive to that. Then some guys are like, hey, I don't play with a chip on my shoulder. I just go play the game. But at the same time, if you start showing some things and you start digging and those little personal attacks, even though they may not seem personal on the surface, every single football player on your team will respond to that.
That's a hell of a way to put it. Not everybody's wired that way, but everybody will respond. I love that. All right, let's get into our deep dive kind of review of a couple of these games from the weekend. We'll start with that Iowa Penn State wonderful game there. So let me throw this out here. I think that Iowa's defense is as advertised, right? They turned Penn State over, and part of it, I think, like, Roberson's he struggles. But the other part of that, if we're being totally open and honest with ourselves, is Clifford turned the ball over when he was in the game too. Those Iowa defensive backs, they're back there running routes like they're wide receivers. And it really makes a difference in the game because you start to look at the average drive starts between the teams, and Iowa did a really good job in the special teams game, and Torrey Taylor punting the ball was really good. But they're starting in great field position. On their own 40 was their average field position, which is absolutely wild, versus Penn State, which is their own 21. Not nearly as good. So I think that's a difference in the game. But I'll also say that Sean Clifford was moving the football. And I talked about this idea that you could throw the ball on Iowa secondary. Now, whether they'd be able to take the football away was a different conversation, but you could get plays. And Clifford had their only explosive passes of the day. And they were all in like the second quarter, take a couple shots, whatever the case was. That was the element that was missing. And if you're a Penn State fan, you're probably asking the question, what happens if he can finish out the game? I don't necessarily love that question. He was on pace for 300 yards passing. He's also on pace for throwing 4 interceptions, so we won't know that. But there is a night and day difference between Roberson running that offense and Cliff running it.
I completely agree, and I think I do understand and I sympathize with those Penn State people who sit there and say if Cliff is finishing that game, I think it's a completely different outlook. And to me, I also was watching it and I felt the same way. The first interception, he just tried to force something.
It's a bad play.
Bad play. But again, for me, that goes back to Iowa only got 3 points out of that, and they were on their own. They got the ball at the 10-yard line. So then Cliff kind of settles in, and I think you saw the difference in philosophy with Clifford because he started making his plays between the numbers, and that's something that I talked about. Is in order to get those safeties out of it, you have to start making plays between the numbers and forcing them to want to come in. He completed that big ball to Parker Washington across the middle that got everything going. I think that was even on third down. So older quarterbacks have that feel of what that feels like, because that picture's scary. You can't always see what's in front of things. You can't always feel. You have to have an understanding and reps at throwing balls into space and throwing balls into holes within the zone. Because again, they do play. They that's what they do. They play quarters, or they'll bring a guy down. They'll play 3, and they might bring a Mike Fire or Sam Fire or something like that. His second interception, they tried to run an in and go, which is a classic quarters beater. I thought he left the ball inside. I think if he leaves it outside a little bit, Dotson has a chance to make a play on it, because they did beat the corner. But I think, to your point, and I think Phil Parker needs a huge tip of the cap, the way that those DBs play the football. They don't necessarily even play the receivers anymore. They just track the ball and they go. And I haven't seen the team do that. And I don't know if he saw something in those guys or not, but I thought that's really impressive.
So I'll jump in on that. Is they have been, for the last 4 years, extremely good at taking the football away. I think in the last 4 years, they have the most interceptions in FBS in that window. That might be the stat, might not be the stat, but it's something crazy like that. But Phil Parker is where he's different than a lot of defensive coaches. Is a lot of guys are, well, make sure you just play the guy. You don't want to lose a man. So if you're not sure, just play the man. Don't try to find the ball. Make sure you're in phase, this, that, and the third. And he's literally got it down to where those guys don't give a damn, like you said, about the wide receiver. And I got to make sure I'm in phase. I got to make sure I'm playing him. Those dudes are out there saying the ball is mine, just the same way it's up there for the wide receiver. And that is a mentality. People always ask, can you coach turnovers, or is it something that just kind of ebbs and flows? I'm a big believer that you can coach it. And he's coaching the hell out of it right now.
He's doing a great job. And I think the scheme plays really well into him, because he never puts those guys in bad positions, because they play very sound. They play quarters. They know their assignment. They know their alignments, and they know when they can get away with things and when they can't. So now, kind of circling back and just touching it off, like I said, I think losing Clifford was huge, because when Roberson got in there, he struggled. He even threw that post to Jahan. He left that outside, and that turned into another turnover. And really, realistically speaking, I think when you have an older guy and you get pinned back inside your own 10 as many times as Penn State did, a lot of, the old football handbook is you try to move the sticks twice. You move the sticks twice, you flip the field, you force them to drive, and then it gets everything going. Penn State could not get out of that. They could not get out of that. And the only drive they really moved the ball past, their own 25 in that situation was the drive that Roberson threw the swing pass on the 4th down, and they got into the trap 2, and they ended up, not getting it. So it was just a really frustrating game to watch once Cliff was out. And I think you really see now as Penn State fans, how big of a factor Sean Clifford is within that offense.
Yep.
And hopefully he can get back out there, have a bye week, get himself healthy, and get back out there for this finisher. Otherwise it could get ugly fast for Penn State.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying it can get real ugly fast for Penn State. I thought the defense played great. I thought, they held a relatively explosive team with great field position with 23 points. And like I said, I want to give Iowa a ton of credit, but at the same time, it just sucked, because I think we didn't get to see the full attack of Penn State, which I think would have been a much different game, because they were really running away with it. I mean, I really think that they had a chance to run away with it there if Clifford just kept playing the game and attacking it the way he did, and see if Iowa could keep up, which is what we talked about. And it ended up not being a track meet. It ended up being an Iowa controlling the field position game, controlling the time of possession, and playing into their brand of football.
Yeah, they had that exactly where they wanted it. It was always important that Clifford would play well, right? Because I think I might have said this coming out of training camp, but like Cliff was still becoming who he has been these last few weeks at that point. But Roberson he looked like a young quarterback, which is not something that you necessarily want to look like. So it was always important that Cliff played well. And now we're seeing the importance of his health to this team. But you mentioned the Penn State defense. And we were sitting watching this game in the green room, and then we had to do a freaking show while this game was still on Fox. So we're trying to, during the commercial breaks, we're trying to watch it in the studio. Neither here nor there. I feel like I always miss something in real time. But we're sitting there watching it, and we're saying that we felt like Penn State always had a chance to win the football game because of how well the defense had played. And it really wasn't until extremely late in the game where you felt like the defense was just kind of, it was the moment. I won't say the moment. The task was too big, having to go out there every single drive with terrible starting field position as a defender and knowing that you have to win the game because your offense can't do piss. Like it just weighs on you. And then Iowa comes out with the schemed up plays to take advantage of coverage and take a couple of shots down the field. I mean, they had big passes of 42 and 44 in the fourth quarter. They hadn't done that all game long.
Yep.
Like that's really tough. I think that this Penn State defense is extremely good. I think it's athletic, it's fast, it's a bunch of guys who give a damn. They had a couple players go down that side of the ball as well, which is, it stinks. But I said this about both teams after the game, specifically about Iowa, but about Penn State if they're fully healthy, is I think both of these teams can contend this year. I think both of them are college football playoff caliber teams. And I think what we've seen over the college football season, but specifically what we saw last week with Alabama getting beat by an unranked team and BYU falls out of the top 10, is anybody can compete this year. And I think these two teams specifically are every bit as good. Penn State when they're fully healthy, Iowa as it is right now, to compete. Not saying that they will win a national title, but they could get in that show and they could compete with anybody.
I agree. And I think we may even get, it may play out where we get a rematch, in Indianapolis. So it would be cool to see. And to your point, I really think the only team right now that has shown how good they really, really are is Georgia. And
agreed.
I think Georgia is unbelievable this year.
Yeah.
Especially defensively. I mean, I think they're leaps and bounds above everybody in that arena. So to your point though, I think Penn State and Iowa are two teams that are built right. They know who they are. And when they're healthy, can go out and play with anybody. So, we'll see what happens, and hopefully Penn State can get those guys back on the field as soon as possible and really make a run at it because, we talked about it earlier. They got a buzzsaw coming down the pipe here. And they're not the only ones. So we'll see what happens.
We definitely will. Let's get into this Michigan at Nebraska, and talked about this on our previews last week. I thought this was going to be a really good game because of the way that Nebraska had played against Oklahoma and how they played against Michigan State, and how Michigan up to this point has not had a great challenge and an opponent. And this game lived up to the billing, for me at least, where it's coming down to the last couple minutes of the game, and Nebraska climbs its way out of a hole it dug for itself, and Michigan's got to find ways to beat a team again. I think it's awesome, and this is a game, and Cade McNamara said this in his post-game interview with Molly McGrath, but he says this is a game that typically we would lose, and they ended up winning it, going on the road in a night game where things start going bad in the second half. Typically, that's a loss, and they found a way to win. Michigan, two things that stand out to me about their offense is that running attack with Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum. I think it is wild what each of them can bring to the offense at different times, with Blake being explosive and very elusive, and Hassan just being hard to take down. And then the tight end room. And you can speak to being a quarterback with tight ends that can make plays and catch the football, what that does. But as a defender, those are some of the hardest matchups, especially guys that can block in line as well. Like we knew what the wide receiver types were going to do, but they've got guys who they expect to line up in line and be blockers that can also get out. They can do the delays, and they can do the block flats, and it's just tough.
Yeah, they're like having stretch fours in basketball. Guys who can run, who can post you up, who can play on the perimeter, and they create mismatches. I think you hit the nail on the head. Are you gonna dedicate a linebacker to try and cover this guy in coverage all game, or are you gonna rotate a safety down and take some help out from the back end, especially if you have some playmakers on the outside? So they really can create a lot of mismatches, and if you use them strategically, they create those advantages in the run game as well as the pass game. To your point, being able to block if they have any type of will to do so. You have the ability to create space with that. So I think to your point, Michigan has a really good understanding of who they are. I think this was exactly what Cade said, a game where Michigan is getting calluses. They're starting to put calluses on their palms, and traditionally a game they would lose, they came out and figured out a way to get it done. I think on the flip side, and I think you mentioned this in the notes too when we were talking throughout the week, is Nebraska played great, and I think Adrian played fantastic up until that what was that, third or fourth down, 3-yard run, and he's fighting for an extra 2 or 3 yards, and the ball gets ripped out of his hand, and that was the killer for them. And I think moving forward, again, I said this last week, Nebraska can't have any more moral victories, but weirdly enough, they figured out a way how to make this a moral victory, and they're still in it. They're still in it in the West. As weird as that sounds, I think they're still in it in the West, and they can really make a run at things. So we'll see what happens. They need some help, but I thought again, it was good. It was a great game for the conference. It showed some strength and some depth, and again, it gave Michigan an opportunity to put something on their resume that meant something up until this point, which they haven't really had.
Yeah. And I think the stat for Martinez is 18 lost fumbles in his career. That's been the Achilles heel for that guy.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's just at the worst time in the game where he turns the football over. I feel so freaking bad for him because he is that offense, and everything that goes well on that offense is because of him. But sometimes the things that go bad are also because of him. And I feel like he doesn't get the recognition he deserves in comparison to the criticism that he gets at times. So let's talk a couple of things about Michigan real quick. Number one, second halves have been their bugaboo this year. And I was talking to a Michigan reporter earlier in the week, and she told me the breakdown between first half points given up versus second half points. And it's something really wild, like 14 points they've given up on the season in the first half of games. And in the second half, it's, 70 some odd points, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
Anyway, we saw this really come to light against Rutgers, where they were able to get back into that game, and that became probably way more uncomfortable than Wolverines would have liked to have seen. And then in this game against Nebraska's all 29 of their points came in the second half of the game. Is this a mentality? Is this a guys getting worn down by the end of the game? What do you see typically in teams that are one thing in the first half and something completely different in the second?
I feel that it's a combination of a few things. I think it's a combination of being content, and then I'm not going to say it's lackadaisical at halftime, but I feel like really good football teams, whether they're winning or losing, make great halftime adjustments. It's a great time to go in, collect. You have a bunch of data. You have so many eyes on it now with GAs and people in the box. You can see how people are trying to take advantage of you or exploit you, and you can see what you've been doing well. And I think that great teams really still do a lot of self-reflection at halftime, even if they are up 20-0 or 13-0 or whatever at halftime. They still do the adjustments to figure out a new way to attack, because all these guys get paid money to watch film. All these guys know football, and all these guys are going to figure out ways how to scheme things up if you have some semblance of talent to be able to do so. So I think it's kind of a combination of maybe Michigan gets a little content, doesn't have that kill in them yet, that step on the throat and finish them. And I think it might also be that they give teams, because they might, from a schematic standpoint, just be content with what they're doing. They give teams the opportunity to have 4 quarters. Like, well, this is who they are. This is what they're doing. They haven't changed anything. So let's just keep attacking it. You know what I mean?
So I think that might be the point. And I said this to one of my close friends who's a Michigan fan on Sunday. But that was the point that I made, is they've got a defensive coordinator who's calling plays for the first time in his career. And their personnel is very good, and I think they are who they are as a defense. So are they now in the second half more of an open book in terms of offensive scheme? Because Nebraska comes out, in my opinion, and they scheme their way through the third quarter.
Yeah.
In the fourth quarter, it felt like they might have run out of some of those like truly schemed up plays. But on the first drive of the third quarter, they hit a 46-yard pass off of pure scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the types of things that you see. And that's where I lean into that idea is, and we used to do this when I was in the league, but we would have a first half scheme kind of game plan idea of what we're going to be defensively. And then the second half for the first 8 plays, we would be something just different. So the offense couldn't come out and run all the shit that they drew up in the locker room.
Yeah.
Is that a situation where it's not even changing up who you are maybe, but like you got somebody who's on the offensive side who says, okay, these are the things I think they're going to run based off of what we've been doing. So these are the adjustments that you guys should make.
It's the cat and mouse. And I think Michigan is talented enough to be something else for a series, for 2 series, whatever it is, and not hurt themselves, not put them in super vulnerable situations where you don't think that those guys can do it. You know what I mean? And I think that's growth. I think that's growth as a play caller. And I think you just have to keep doing it. You have to be put in those situations, and you have to have the sack to be able to go do it. Honestly, I mean, that's what it comes down to. You have to be able to say, all right, this is who I am. And everyone has their blankies. Everyone has their thumb and their binkies that they go back to, both offensively and defensively. But having the ability to look at yourself and say, this is what I've been doing. Well, let me do something that I feel comfortable enough putting these guys in that situation, but it's completely different. And what it's going to do is it's going to slow down thought process. And you only have so much time and so many opportunities offensively to be able to exploit things. If you have something mix you up and you don't, as an offense, have an identity that's like, okay, I can just go back to this and this is what we do. And it's good versus everything. I know these kids can execute it versus everything because we worked on it all spring or all camp or whatever. If you don't have that, it slows it down and it gives you an advantage defensively, because now you're like, all right, we just threw a monkey wrench in the thing. Now we can go back to what I like to do. And now you got the guy scrambling. And I think it's interesting. And it's always that cat and mouse. And that's what I love about football, is the mental side of it. And I think you bring up great points for Michigan, and we'll see what happens. It'll be a cool maturity path for the defensive coordinator up there and how they attack things moving forward.
Yeah, and Michigan is on a bye week this week, so they've got every opportunity to kind of try those new things and really do the self-scout and the self-study to figure out exactly what changes they need to make. So I think this is coming at a perfect time. And the fact of the matter is, as I watch this team, it's a veteran quarterback who does not make mistakes, a really good rushing attack, good offensive line, really good tight end play, in a defense full of athletes that I think are really confident and believe in themselves right now. This is a dangerous football team. And it's going to be tough for them in the end, playing in the East like it is for everybody else. But I can't wait to watch these guys, because I want to see what this team takes shape like. Is this going to be the team that folks thought it was at the beginning of the year that was unranked and you had questions about? Or does this become a team that really opens some eyes, which I think it truly can, and upset some people over there in the East?
Yeah, I agree. We'll see what happens.
Let me tell you about our sponsors over at BetRivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up yet, BetRivers is offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart from everyone else is that they require just one playthrough to turn that bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawals are not only fast, they are safe, secure, and reliable. Go to betrivers.com today or download the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, let's get on to our big thoughts this week. Since it's kind of the midpoint of the year, I wanted to do some mid-season awards. Just go through some guys that we think are really balling out, deserve some recognition after 6 weeks of play here. So for our offensive player of the year, mid-season award, who you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it between two guys, and obviously one guy is gonna depend on the latter half of the season. I think Kenneth Walker III is you can't keep him out of it. I think he's been such an integral part of that program up there, and his play has been fantastic. And then my other one's Clifford. I think if Clifford can come back healthy and lead these guys through this back half of the season, it's going to be really hard to discredit him. If he can lead them, win out, go win a Big Ten championship, and then go play in a college football playoff, it's going to be really hard not to give the guy that, because that's a tough schedule. And as we saw, that offense goes as Cliff goes.
Yeah, I agree with that on Cliff. He would be, if there was a true MVP award, I think he's that guy. He is most valuable to his team. And we saw that in their game. You talked about Kenneth Walker. They need to start a legit Heisman campaign for him right now.
100%.
152 yards a game rushing, 9 rushing touchdowns. He's got an average of 7 a carry. And when I watch him, it's a hold your breath type situation, because you don't know if he's going to truck stick a dude and take it the distance. You don't know if he's going to shake a dude out of shoes and take it the distance. I think he is really, really good. But the guy who I kind of want to go to, and he's a little bit off the board, but I think that he deserves a lot of praise for what he's done this year, is the quarterback in East Lansing, in Peyton Thorne. Here's a guy who is averaging 10 yards an attempt. He's got 14 touchdowns on the season against 2 interceptions. He's throwing for about 260 a game. He's completing a really good amount of his passes, 62% of them. I think that is another situation where if they didn't get the quarterback figured out, that offense would be trash, because their quarterback play last year was abysmal. It was not good. And he has done a great job of understanding the identity of the offense, of distributing the ball to the playmakers, of taking the ball when he needs to, as well, of being accurate and taking care of the football. He's done all the things right, and nobody expected him to be this good.
Yeah. And I think, people sit there and scoff at 62%, but with their philosophy offensively, like you said, he's averaging 10 yards attempt. He's not throwing bubble screens and hitches and getting jet sweeps and handing it off and boosting his. I mean, he's throwing a legit 62% at pushing the ball
down the field.
And that's what he has to do. And that's kind of what Mel Tucker has always done. Even when you look back at Colorado, his quarterbacks pushed the ball down the field. They weren't, dink and dunk and let's just nickel and dime them. They were like, listen, we're gonna figure out a way to establish a run. You guys are gonna attack. It's almost like that Bruce Arians type feel. And he, as long as he keeps playing, I could completely see that. And if they happen to knock a couple of these guys off, the Michigan State, the Penn State, the Ohio State, if they knock a couple of those guys off, he puts himself right in there. He plays well. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that'd be one of the things for him is, the table set for him. If he can go out there and he can be disruptive as a quarterback in those games, I think the conversation really heats up. Switch it over to defense. Who do you got for the defensive side of the ball?
So we just found out that Riley's apparently out for a little bit, but Riley Moss is my guy. I think he's just been playing so well. He's a ball hawk. I think he's a staple for that defense leader. So he's my guy. And obviously it's going to change depending upon if he can get back out there or not, and how quickly that happens. But that's the guy I want to highlight and give a lot of credit to.
I think he's doing a hell of a job. Difference maker would just be the word flat out there. On my side, I'm going a little bit off the board again. And this is a guy who I respect the hell out of, because he's not on a great football team. It's not a flashy brand. He's got a good player on the interior of his defensive line, but there's not another end that anybody's devoting resources to on his team. It's George Karlaftis. And I met him over the summer. He's definitely a football guy. Like he gets excited, like, like he'll be a great coach one day if he wants to do that. But I watched game tape of him in multiple games, and this dude is at minimum getting double teamed. Against Notre Dame, they devoted so many resources to blocking him. It was ridiculous. Like, it absolutely blew my mind. And the crazy part about it was he was beating double teams. And there was one play where there were like 4 different guys that hit him at one point. It's absolutely nuts. And you can look at stats for something like this, or you can watch football games. And I think watching the games would lead you to believe that he's the best defensive player in this conference, because people go to any length to make sure that he can't make the football play. Right now, another guy who is really good, but he has the benefit of being around other good players, is Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. He's a game record type, plays hard, motor, the whole deal. His benefit is he's got David Ojabo on the other side of that defensive line. So that's where I gave the edge to George Karlaftis. Is this man's got to eat on his own every single time, and he's still killing the game.
I think you bring up like the most interesting point, and it's so hard because of how much media has gotten into all of these things across college football. But when you have football guys sit there and turn on the game and turn on the tape, they notice things, they watch things a little bit different. And those points that you made for anyone listening right now, like those are great points to expand upon your knowledge, whether you played, whether you didn't play, whether you just watch. Like, don't listen to the talking heads. Like, go in there and evaluate it yourself, right? Like,
yes.
When you watch certain guys play, they may not have the stats, they may not have the team around them, but certain guys always figure out a way how to outplay their circumstances, really, is what it comes down to. And those guys need a lot of recognition. And the funny thing is, though, is the ball doesn't lie. The game always gives back. Like, that guy's probably going to go on and have a hell of a professional career if he stays healthy and all that stuff. But those guys need some recognition, and you got to be able to see the depth of the conference as a voter for those certain things, because it's just, when guys overcome that, it's fun to watch.
It is. That's the thing that stands out to me, is the dude plays as hard as anybody in the conference, and he's beating people even though they're trying to block him with 2. And he's not playing, I don't think, for as much in terms of the team as other guys are.
Yeah.
Like that always stands out to me in this day and age of football, where he probably could have gone out there for the first 3 games, balled out, and then said, you know what, I'm going to focus on myself. But he is out there getting just hammered every game for the love of it, because he ain't getting the stats right now, but he's making the difference, though, because his buddies are getting the stats.
Yeah, he's playing sound.
And that's always a difference maker. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that guy at Michigan, Aiden Hutchinson, though, because the dude is fucking balling. Like, I watch his speed off the edge, and then when he doesn't make the play, the thing that stands out to me is he pursues the ball with intensity.
Never shuts off.
Never. Yeah. And he celebrates his teammates, which I think is big, because a lot of guys don't do that stuff anymore. So those are my 2 guys. Freshmen, who you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the Ohio State backfield. I think it's Stroud and TREVOR. And I don't even think it's close. Yeah. So we'll see whoever pulls that out. But
yeah, I think it's pretty open and shut on that. I mean, what does CJ got? Like 800 yards passing and 10 touchdowns in the last 2 games.
Last 2 weeks. Yeah.
Henderson's going out there as 102 rushing, and then he's going to turn around and have 67 in the pass game as well.
Yeah, they're both great. They're going to be fun to watch for the next couple of years, and they're gonna drive that ship. Offensively, it's going to be on their back for the next few years, as long as they're in town.
You want the stat on those 2 guys?
I mean, shoot, dude, you're the stat guy. So
yeah, Big Ten Freshman of the Week honors have gone to C.J. Stroud or TREVOR Henderson every single week.
Every week. Yeah.
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 So
there's
a stat on that.
There you go. Done.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into this coach of the year, because I think there's one guy who's clear cut. There's another guy who we absolutely need to talk about, though.
So, yeah. And here's my thing. I think this award in the Big Ten, if things keep playing out the way I think they're going to play out, it's going to be a fun race. You know, you got Shiano, you got Bielema up there having an opportunity again. But right now for me, it's Mel Tucker. The job he's done, the way he's motivated those guys, the way that they're playing, like we talked about, nobody had them anywhere in the stratosphere of where they're at right now in terms of competing and playing and the product they put on the field. And he just does a great job of motivating them. I think he's done a great job of establishing his expectations and his brand that he brought to that program, which is tough to do coming off of D'Antonio, who has been there so long and people are so used to it. I think he did a great job of kind of blending the two, giving the people what they want, but also, you know, being like, listen, guys, this is my program now and this is the direction I'm driving it. And I think he's done a great job of that.
Yeah. And I think Michigan State did the right thing in bringing in another tough guy, because sometimes you see these coaching hires and they'll go from one thing to another. But Dino was an all-time tough guy, always kind of had a scowl on his face, you know, like never looked too happy. And his team embodied that. They always had a scowl on their face. They never looked too happy. They were always salty. And then you follow that up with Mel, who I think is more energetic, but he's the same type of toughness and the same level of super intense about all the things that he believes it takes to win. And the team has really taken on his personality and his energy. And from what they were a year ago, and he was hired late in the cycle last year, it was like February and they didn't have spring practice. And it was a weird year to now being what they are, where a lot of people, and I admit to this every time I talk about it, I had them finishing in the basement. They're way better than that. That was something I was totally wrong on. But from where people expected them to be and where they were, frankly, a year ago to now, is a hell of a job in coaching. He went out in the portal. He got some guys like the dude he's a legit coach. Like, he is absolutely worth the money that they're paying him. The other guy we absolutely should talk about is Kirk Ferentz. He's been around the conference for forever. Been around one place longer than anybody in the country has. That was a program that was dealing with a reckoning in the locker room with culture and with the way that players thought they were being treated, and with, frankly, some of the things that the coaching staff admitted to doing that they understood in hindsight weren't the right things. They had to rally a locker room, bring them back together in a very strange year last year that also saw a social reckoning just in society. And they got off to a terrible start. And then they went on a hell of a win streak that they've continued into this year. And in a lot of situations, they have been in control of their opponents, not necessarily domineering, but in control of situations of opponents and of games. And I think that he deserves credit for being able to keep a locker room together and then build something last year and continue it into this year.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about Iowa. They're a cyclical program, right? And the only way that you can sustain that is if you do come around every 3 or 4 years and become somebody who can knock the best top team off in the conference. And Iowa's always been able to do that. And that doesn't come from anywhere but the top. You know what I mean? If you don't have a guy at the top who understands that, embraces it, and puts a lot of time, energy, and effort into development of players and consistency as it pertains to expectations and culture, you're never going to be able to do it. And I think Kirk has just mastered that. And to your point, he knows who they are. He never puts them in situations where they can't be successful. And he focuses, I think, heavily on the development side of things with players, because he's not going out and snagging 5 stars. You're not seeing 4 and 5 stars just flocking to Iowa. You know what I mean? But he does a great job of developing talent, putting them in situations to be successful and instilling confidence in them. And you see it; they just keep rolling around every year.
Yep, definitely developmental program, and he does, like you said, a great job every single year. Finally, I'm gonna ask you for your midseason conference champ game prediction. So, who's making it from the West? Who's making it from the East?
Right now, obviously, it's hard not to say Iowa from the West.
Yeah.
I mean, the East is so hard just because of what we touched on earlier. There's a buzzsaw coming the end of the month heading in through November. So I think Ohio State, as it sits with question marks at Penn State being, is Cliff going to be healthy? Is he going to ever be back to 100% this year? I think it's going to come down to, can Ohio State keep developing offensively and doing what they've been doing the last few weeks? And then, I think Michigan and Michigan State are teams where if they come in and play well, can both pull it off either. So it's going to come from one of those four. I know that's it's such an easy thing to say, and it's the obvious answer, but to me, it's the right answer. So
yeah, I'm going Iowa, and then I'm going to be a homer on this one, but I'm going Ohio State, and I think this is going to happen in spite of their defense at times.
Yeah.
Ohio State's defense has scored the football in 4 consecutive games off of pick sixes. So if you're a Buckeye fan, that probably gives you hope that they can continue to take steps. They're still, in my mind, giving up far too many plays over their head. And that's always going to be an issue. And especially when you start to get to, Penn State with Parker Washington, Jahan Dotson. And we talked about Jalen Naylor and Jaden Reed from Michigan State. And I don't know if Michigan's got the over your head all the time threat, but we've seen Samerstill, who did a really good job extending and catching a really tough ball in that game. And Cornelius Johnson has done a really good job stepping in for Ronnie Bell. So I think it'll be in spite of defense. I'm going Ohio State against Iowa, though, in that game.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up with our previews in this last segment. I'm going to be completely honest, folks. This is not the greatest slate that we've ever been advertised in the Big Ten Conference. We've got number 10, Michigan State, who's a 3.5 favorite. Over-under is 52 in that game, per our friends over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. At Indiana, this is an 11 o'clock kick, FS1 if anybody's trying to watch that. Homecoming. So biggest thing for me in this game would have to be Jack Tuttle playing quarterback for Indiana. He is a guy who's been out on the field before. He's got some experience. Obviously, a very different player than Michael Penix Jr. And what you get in these bye weeks, if you have an offensive staff that is good, is an opportunity to sit down with the backup and ask him what he likes in the game plan. What are you comfortable with? What concepts do you like? What are the things that you think you're best at, and tailor it to that guy. He is a serviceable backup, but I hate to disparage backups, but he's a backup quarterback. So it's an opportunity right here for Michigan State, I think, to be more dominant than the 3.5.
I agree. I think it's a great opportunity for them to continue to build upon what they've been doing. And you really look back at it in Penn State, the last time Indiana was on the field, if I remember correctly, the Penn State team was able to run for 205 yards. And that's something that they have not been able to do at all this year consistently. Now you have a great attack coming in with some burners on the outside. I think it's an opportunity for Michigan State to be just as explosive, if not more explosive than they were against Rutgers, because I think offensively Indiana might be able to bring a little bit more juice. But I do think Michigan State has a chance to cover that and then some.
Yeah, I think so. It'll just be for them. I think it's about consistency at this point, just being on track all the time.
Staying on schedule.
Rutgers favored by 1 at Northwestern. I think that number is wrong as hell. I think Northwestern is so not good right now. Like very not good right now. And I think Rutgers needs more credit than they're probably getting at this point, because you look at the 3-week stretch for them. It's Michigan, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan State. It's not reality. What we saw at Rutgers in those 3 weeks, that ain't indicative of who they probably really are when they're playing normal competition. So I think they're going to blow that number out the water.
Yeah, I think Rutgers is in a position now, and I kind of talked about it after the Ohio State game. Like, how are they going to respond to a Michigan State coming up? And realistically speaking, I mean, it was 20-13 going into halftime this week. So, I mean, they were there, they were in it, they were close, but ultimately Michigan State just had some guys that made some plays and separated. So I think it's an opportunity for Rutgers to get back on track, start feeling a little bit more confident moving forward, and knowing that they survived that stretch right there. That's, tough stretch to survive, but they survived it as best as they could. Now they got a chance to really go there and try to attack being bowl eligible and win some football games. So I agree with you. I think they got a chance. I don't think Northwestern's done anything to really merit any type of credit or expectations up until this point. So I do like Rutgers in this one.
Yeah, and that bowl eligibility point that you brought up, I think, is big. For Rutgers, it was huge for them to start the way that they did, going 3-0, because you understood what the next stretch was going to be like for the next 3 games, where you got Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, where you're probably going to lose those games. But now they're 3-3. So that means that they have to steal 3 more on the back half of their schedule. And I truly think it starts with this week. They should win against Northwestern. I think they should blow that number out. If they want to be bowl eligible, they're going to have to. The rest of their schedule after Northwestern, they got Illinois, which is a winnable game. Wisconsin, I can't believe I'm going to say, is a winnable game for Rutgers. Indiana has not looked good. They got Penn State, and then they got Maryland at the end. So the opportunities are out there, but you also want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room.
Yep.
Just in case you end up dropping one that you shouldn't. They got to get this one against a team that I think that they're way better than right now.
I agree.
All right, Nebraska at Minnesota. Nebraska's 2.5-point favorite. So this is one of those games that I can't get a feel for. I think Nebraska has the edge. They're going to be more explosive for sure offensively. And I like the way that their defense has played, just the energy and the intensity on that side of the football. Minnesota is also going to be without their running back, Trey Potts, who was in the hospital. He had to stay back at Purdue. It's an undisclosed injury. I don't know what it is. PJ Fleck's not sharing that information. He's going to wait until Trey wants to share it before anybody gets to know that, which I totally respect. But he's out of the game plan. Obviously, Mo Ibrahim went out of the game plan in week 1. So this is an offense that's really hampered because they haven't been able to throw the ball very well.
Yeah.
Nebraska should win this football game, right? We've seen Nebraska make mistakes and lose in opportunities where they shouldn't. And also, PJ Fleck is a master motivator, and he's probably going to go on this podcast and play the clip of me talking about how their offense isn't explosive enough. And then those guys are going to go out and have 300 yards passing just because he heard me say it. But that you get what I'm saying about PJ, though. I think he's something that you can't discount just in terms of a leader and a motivator.
I agree. I think the one thing you mentioned, it may have been last week, it was one of these weeks, though. Minnesota controls the football offensively.
They do.
They take their time. They try to win that battle every week. And that's a big battle, and that's going to only cut the opportunities that Nebraska's going to have down, right? And Nebraska, like you said, has hurt themselves a lot of times. So I think this is a game where if Nebraska wants to come in and do what they're expected to do, they need to take advantage of their opportunities because they may not get a ton of them. They cannot burn them with turnovers or stupid self-inflicting plays. But ultimately, I think that where both teams are, and I think you did a great job of explaining it, where both teams are, this is an incredible opportunity for Nebraska. And I think Minnesota's going to have to do something really special to win this game.
Yeah, and Nebraska is another one of those teams where they're trying to find their way through the East or through the West, excuse me. And they're trying to find their way to bowl eligibility as well.
Yeah.
You know, they've lost some games that I feel like are real heartbreakers. They feel probably like they're a team that should be in a situation to play in the bowl, but they got to go out there and win the football games. I'm trying to pull up their schedule right now. So what are they? 3-4 right now. Um, so they've got Minnesota, which we talked about as a winnable game. They got Purdue, which is a winnable game. They're playing Ohio State, but the Buckeyes are traveling to Lincoln. So weird things happen there, apparently. I've never played there. Wisconsin's a game they should win, the way Wisconsin is right now. And then they got Iowa. And if they're building momentum, that's going to be Iowa's biggest test at the end of the year. I mean, that's it. So, but they got to get 3 wins out of the remainder of their schedule, which I think that the games are out there. But this is another situation. If they mess this up against Minnesota, I don't know what you want. I don't know what you want them to do, but that puts them in a bad situation. Yeah,
I agree. I completely agree. So they gotta get the ones that they could get. I think it's similar to Rutgers in this situation right now. They gotta get the ones that they should get here moving forward.
Yeah. All right. We got Purdue at Iowa. Iowa's a 12.5-point favorite. This is a mid-afternoon game. It's homecoming for Iowa. The stat to watch here is Kirk Ferentz is 1-3 versus Jeff Brom Purdue teams. Is this one of those ugly upsets?
You know, you come off a big win like they had against Penn State. It is a letdown, one of those, deflate the balloon type opportunities. I think when you watch Purdue, if they can offensively, again, as we go back to it, take care of the football.
Right.
I think they have enough firepower on the offensive side of the ball to be able to score with Iowa. I think when you look at it, but ultimately, again, as we continue to talk about this with this Iowa team, I think it's going to come down to, can that defense create some turnovers and put that offense in short field opportunities, and they've been able to do it. So, I heard you talking about it the Big Ten this past week. It's like, we sit there and we say like it's not sustainable, but it's been sustainable. So
every week,
let's just see what happens and see how it plays out. But as it pertains to the opportunity for this to be a trap game, I think it definitely has that possibility. Will it play out that way? I'm not so sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Yeah, I got pretty good confidence in Iowa at this point that they're going to not do dumb things. I feel like as soon as I say that, like, that's when the dumb things start to happen. But I don't think that this team is going to do a lot of things to hurt themselves. Iowa has the biggest benefit out of anybody to me right now is they're not looking down their schedule saying, okay, in 2 weeks we have this team, or in 3 weeks we have this team. Like, they have nobody coming up that should be able to play in the same league as them. So I think they should be able to cruise in this one. Last game is Army at Wisconsin. This could be the shortest game of the college football season because everybody run the ball.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
I'll say from the defensive.
I'm an Army homer, dude. I'm an Army homer. My uncle played at Army. I hope Army pulls something out of there. Something out of their tail. Yeah, my uncle played D tackle at West Point, so I'm an Army homer. I hope they pull something out of their tail. It'd be funny to watch. Obviously I hate going against a Big Ten team. But
yeah, so I don't know if I can say that per my other contract, but so as a defender, the option teams, they screw you. They screw you the week of, and they screw you the week after.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they do. They're going to be cutting at your legs, so you got to make sure that you're staying up on your feet. It's sleight of hand. They're playing trickeration with the ball. So if you're supposed to tackle the dive. You tackle the quarterback, tackle the pitch. Like, just do your job. It doesn't matter. Tackle everybody every play, and you've defended it, right? But you got to stay on your feet to do that. And the reason I say it screws you for the week after is you devote all your time and resources into something that you're never going to see again. When you could have been playing more of a pro style or a spread offense that you can build upon the concepts. So this is a good defense for Wisconsin. Their offense, I don't want to even get into. They're the best run defense in the country by far. I'm sure Army will have something to say about that because all they do is run the football. But it could be a really short game. I don't know how many people will be mad about that.
Yeah, I agree with that though. Yeah, let's get it, burn it, turn it, and burn it. Let's get it going.
Turn it, burn it.
Fourth preseason game. Let's get it going, boys.
Run the clock.
Get out of here.
I love it. Well, that was another good one, my guy.
Yeah, man.
We'll have to catch up and do this again next week, I guess, huh?
I know. I guess we got to do it.
Yeah. It's something that we hate. The both of us can't stand football and can't stand talking about it, right?
No.
Well, all right, guys. This is the JP and Hack Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network, Season 1, Episode 8, presented by our partners at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. Again, Joshua Perry, my guy Christian Hackenberg, and we will be back at you next week.